The world's oceans are crammed with discarded plastic waste particles, which are destroying the environment, killing wildlife, and ultimately threatening human health. One refuse truck's worth of plastic is dumped into the ocean every minute, the equivalent of 8 million tonnes of plastic entering the oceans every year. Leaking from our coasts, it breaks up into small particles, mixing with the plankton at the ocean's surface. Zooplankton consists of the tiny animals that form the base of the marine food chain, and phytoplankton are the minute plants that provide us with more than half the oxygen we breathe. Our oceans keep us alive. But it's not just the oceans that are suffering. In the developing world, many families scavenge on enormous landfill sites comprising an ever-increasing mass of mostly plastic waste, never sorted, never recycled. UK-based Plastic Energy is a world forerunner in the use of end-of-life plastics to create synthetic fuels. We recycle dirty, contaminated, non-recyclable waste plastic, and through a process called thermal anaerobic conversion, known as TAC, transform it into fuel, which has the capability to power a plane. Pilot Jeremy Rousel has proved this with his historic On Wings of Waste flight in Australia.
Well, it's a sign of hope in a very depressing world that at last a mechanism has been found, a way of turning plastic waste into something that can be used and be valuable. We're turning it back into a kind of diesel fuel. Oil produced the plastic, and we now know how we can actually convert the plastic back into a kind of oil which is usable as fuel. And even if that was very expensive indeed, it would be worth doing. But the likelihood is that it's going to come down to a competitive price. And what a splendid way of getting rid of this appalling disease that's spreading around the world and turning it into something useful.
The plastic waste we use comes from domestic, commercial and agricultural sources. The use of plastics has increased 20-fold in the past half-century and is expected to double again in the next 20 years. 500 billion plastic bags are used every year. That's more than 1 million bags a minute. And America alone throws away 35 billion plastic water bottles a year. This is waste that is destined for landfill, taking hundreds of years to degrade. Each year, more than $300 billion worth of plastic is dumped in landfills. By reusing that plastic as part of the circular economy, we're not only producing something of benefit to business and industry, but we also reduce the carbon footprint and lessen the impact of plastic pollution on the land and in the sea. Of the material you've seen, 90 to 95% is usable for fuels, and the remaining 5 to 10%, known as char, is used as solid fuel, additives, or pigment. Plastics are heated in an oxygen-free environment to prevent them from burning, and then broken into their component hydrocarbons to create the equivalent of a petroleum distillate. This can then be separated into different fuels. There is no burning of the plastics, but rather a melting process, with emissions well below European regulation limits. Our plants are prepared to process all kinds of plastics, as well as mixes of various types. The process profitability will vary depending on the plastic mix. We can produce up to 19,000 litres of fuel from 20 tonnes of plastic feedstock. So imagine what could be accomplished through chemical recycling. If 10% of new plastics could be produced from waste plastics, and, by adopting a circular economy, imagine if 1% of transportation fuels in Europe and 10% of aircraft fuels could come from waste plastics. In broader terms, the UK, for example, could produce 840 million litres of diesel if it diverted the 1.2 million tonnes of plastic it currently sends to landfill. So we can increase national production of synthetic second-generation fuels and at the same time reduce dependence on imported energy sources. We have ambitious but realistic plans for the future. Our scope is international, and we can help local economies and create job opportunities with every plant that we open. We have the first mover advantage bringing this technology to Europe and America for the very first time. We aim to lead the way into a future of better quality synthetic second-generation fuels, produced from plastic waste that is hardly recyclable through conventional processes. We also aim to continue to innovate, improving the technology and engineering and benchmarking our operations. We strongly believe that this is the way forward for the environment, for business and industry, and in the long term, for the health and well-being of our planet.